Did you know, in the late 1990s, Warner Brothers was pouring money into a Superman film that seemed destined for disaster? Directed by Tim Burton, starring Nicolas Cage, and written by, well, a lot of people. After spending $30 million and being only 2 weeks away from filming, Warner pulled the plug, killing any chance of this film coming to life. Or did they? I'm Hunter Clark, and this is what happened, the story, and what went wrong with Superman Lives. The film has a complicated history. There's actually 4 different scripts written by 4 different people. We're gonna mainly focus on that 4th script, as that's the one they were actually planning on shooting, but we need to talk about the 2nd script, which was written by none other than Kevin Smith. You know, the guy who made Clerks, Jay and Silent Bob, Mallrats, etc. You've seen his work. He got invited to the Warner Brothers office where he had a chance to read the draft for the upcoming Superman movie. He read the script and hated it. Absolutely ripped it apart, right in front of the executives at Warner Brothers too. So then they asked him, well, what would you change? And he said, well, the title to start. Because this movie wasn't originally called Superman Lives, it was called Superman Reborn. He then started throwing ideas out at them, and they were impressed with his comic knowledge. They actually ended up hiring him to create a new script for the movie, but first he would have to meet with the producer of the film, Jon Peters. Now, according to Smith, when he met with Jon Peters, he was told that there were 3 rules he must follow for the script. 1, he didn't want Superman to fly. 2nd, he didn't want him in that costume. Yeah, no, the Superman costume. And 3rd, and this was a big one, Superman had to fight a giant spider in the 3rd act. Keep that in mind because it will be important later. Kevin thought this guy was crazy, but went with it anyways because, I mean, come on, he's getting the chance to work on a Superman film. I actually read through that script in preparation for this video, and I love Kevin Smith's movies, but this was terrible. It reads like bad fan fiction. The story was an adaptation of The Death of Superman, but it was stacked to the brim with characters. Superman, Deadshot, Brainiac, Lex Luthor, the Eradicator, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Cyborg Superman, Doomsday. Even Michael Keaton's Batman had a cameo where, at Superman's funeral, he took over all the TVs at Metropolis's version of Times Square and broadcasted a sympathetic message. Even Kevin Smith came out later and said that it wasn't a great script, but the studio actually wanted to move forward with it. When they asked Kevin and Jon who they thought should direct it, they said Tim Burton, who had done a fantastic job with the Batman movies. Kevin had no idea that that suggestion would change his life. Warner Brothers reached out to Tim Burton to see if he would be interested in coming back and working on another superhero movie. He read the script and signed on as the director. And what's the first thing he does? Fire Kevin Smith. He actually kind of hated the script and wanted to bring in one of his guys to write a new one. Never forget, kids, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. But anyways, they bring in this new guy, Wesley Strick, who admitted he wasn't much of a fan of Superman, so he took Kevin's script and retooled it. The story was still a Death of Superman adaptation, but more concise, focused, and had a lot more action and huge set pieces. Now that they had a new script, it was time to start getting serious and cast the roles of these characters. Imagine this lineup. Christopher Walken as Brainiac, Sandra Bullock, or Courtney Cox, we're still not sure, as Lois Lane, Chris Rock for Jimmy Olsen. I actually might have enjoyed this. Kevin Spacey as Lex Luthor, and of course, the reason you clicked on this video, Nicolas Cage as Superman. Now don't get it twisted, this dude wasn't just interested in playing Superman, he was obsessed. He actually owned one of the rarest Superman comics, he named his kid Kal-El, I swear to God that's true. The dude just loves Superman. Burton thought he would be a good fit because this new iteration of Superman was going to be insecure, an outsider, and darker in tone. After he met Burton and Peters, Nick signed on as Superman and they got to work. Now what's interesting is most films don't make it this far into production before getting canceled. Nick actually came in for pre-production, and we even have footage of his costume test where he was preparing for the role. Well, this was happening, things weren't looking very good behind the scenes. Director Tim Burton and producer Jon Peters weren't getting along. Allegedly, Jon would come into the studio and physically abuse people working on the films. There are multiple accounts of Jon bringing random women into the office and putting the employees in a headlock, wrestling to the ground, whatever, to try and impress the ladies he was with. Peters defended himself by saying this.
Well, I was more of creating an energy of an action hero and a world that most men don't know anything about.
But things went from bad to worse after the colossal failure that was Batman and Robin. Warner Brothers was burned bad from that film, and they started to get a bit gun-shy. They took a look at the screenplay that Wesley Strick was working on and didn't like it at all, and actually made Tim Burton fire him. They then hired Dan Gilroy. Dan would be the final screenwriter for Superman Lives, and the entire script actually leaked online years ago. So what does a Nicolas Cage Superman movie look like? It starts in a bizarre way. We're on Krypton seeing the end of the planet. There's Jor-El, Superman's dad, Laura, Superman's mom, and Brainiac. Brainiac is a computer system that Jor-El built. He has a green head and a humanoid robot body. He hates baby Superman because Jor-El focused more on him than Brainiac. Yeah, for real. Superman's parents put him in a rocket right before the planet blows up, and Brainiac kills both of them, but doesn't manage to kill Superman before the rocket blasts off. He screams to the baby, "If it takes all eternity, I will find you, Kal-El." After that, we get the title screen and it cuts to modern-day Metropolis. Superman has been Superman for years now. The Man of Steel is introduced by fighting some of Lex Luthor's goons, in which they shoot a rocket at Superman, he catches it, and throws it back at them. These aren't just regular guys, not superpowered or anything. Somehow one guy survives and drives off in a tanker truck. During the chase, the tanker falls off the highway and almost crushes a family, but Superman catches it and saves them. It's actually a pretty great scene and is more in character than him throwing a rocket at someone, but it jumps right back out of character when Superman catches up to the truck driver and welds the gas pedal to the floor as it's heading for a brick wall. He interrogates the driver until the last second, where he saves him, but the truck still explodes into the wall. He finds out it was a Luthor who put them up to this, and flies to LexCorp. At LexCorp, he breaks into an elevator that Luthor is in and picks him up by the throat. Yeah, this definitely feels like a Batman movie rather than a Superman movie. Clark actually lets him go though because he has no proof that Lex was involved. A few days go by and the plot really kicks off when Lex announces to the world that he found an alien spacecraft that landed on Earth 30 years ago, which was the ship that Superman came in as a baby. This shocks the world because they don't believe in aliens, which might have you confused. Apparently Clark and the rest of the world don't know that Superman is an alien. Everyone, including him, thinks that he's a fluke in evolution. Now this is where he gets that insecurity, anxiety, and feels like a loner. But anyways, when the scientists start messing with the ship, we see what's described as a alien Rubik's Cube start to light up in Clark's apartment. That'll be important later though. We also see Brainiac's ship, which looks like a giant skull, start to light up as he gets a signal that Kryptonian technology is being used on Earth. While he's heading here, we get the best part of the movie, a montage of Superman doing Superman things. Not even big things, but he heats up a homeless person's pizza using his heat vision, helps a teenage paper boy carry a huge stack of paper, tightens a valve on a fire hydrant, just stuff that like Superman would do, and it just shows his character. After this, Superman goes to see Lois, and it turns out that they're dating, or more like a situationship, but she still doesn't know that he's Clark Kent. Because the scientist found the ship in Smallville and she was starting to add things up, he asks her to dinner as Clark to tell her the truth. He is a nervous wreck, and we start to see that insecurity a lot more. He's so nervous that he starts thumping his leg, and because he's Superman, everyone in the restaurant's water starts to spill and vibrate. He even has to go outside and fly around the Earth a few times just to get the courage to tell her. In order to prove to her that he's telling the truth, he takes a lump of coal off the table and turns it into a diamond in his hand, which is honestly baller as hell. That was a cool scene. While this is happening, Brainiac lands on Earth with Doomsday and meets Lex Luthor. After just a page or two of dialogue, he merges bodies with Luthor and is now referred to as Lexiac, which I think is the stupidest thing in the entire world. So now the two are merged as one, but Lex was scheduled to announce his alien findings to the world, so there are a ton of people at LexCorp, including kids and Lois's niece, who is there on a field trip and is kind of part of the story, kind of not really though. Lexiac, I'm not calling him that. Let's just stick with Brainiac. You'll know who I'm talking about. Brainiac learns from Lex's assistant that in order to find Superman, all he has to do is put people in danger. So he uses his electrical powers to send the elevators into chaos, plunging them down 100 stories. Clark is there as a reporter, so he jumps into action, and I haven't mentioned this before, but it's worth noting that every time we've seen Clark switch into his costume, he does so by jumping so fast that his clothes burn right off him. I thought it was worth mentioning. It just feels very 90s that they were too cool to do like the classic changing a scene, so whatever. Of course, Superman saves all the people in the elevators and goes to the top floor to confront Lex. When he does, Lex's head rips open and Brainiac's head comes out. He then says, "Meet a genetic remnant from your past." And then he sicks Doomsday on him. Doomsday is a huge gray beast that is just a killing machine. They start fighting and Doomsday smashes him to the bottom floor, sending them both through the pavement into a crater. They get up and start fighting a bit more, but when they made that crater, a gas main was broken. Lois is at the edge of the crater watching them fight as police officers try and maintain the crowd. Now Doomsday gets the upper hand on Superman, but right as he's about to be killed, Superman sees an electrical line, grabs it, and rips it in half. The sparks ignite the gas main and they both are killed in the explosion. Yep, Superman is dead, and it only took about 2 pages worth of fighting for it to happen. And it was from a gas explosion. I don't know, a bit anticlimactic if you ask me. Lois goes down to his body and does the iconic Death of Superman hold. We then see his funeral, which was actually inspired by Princess Diana's funeral in real life. At the time of writing the script, John Peters saw the funeral playing on TV, called writer Dan Gilroy, and made him come over and watch it, because that's exactly what he thought Superman's funeral would be like. It's actually a really emotional scene that I felt sad reading. It definitely had heart, but this tension is immediately ruined because it cuts to Brainiac eating one of Lex's piranhas alive for some reason. Also, even though Superman is gone, he's still pretending to be Lex Luthor. His assistant actually asked him the same question I'm wondering. Why even do all this goodwill and make the public like you? Why not just take over the world already? We never get a real answer to that, and whatever. Some time has passed, and Lois has started experiencing some symptoms. We'll get back to that later. We're now back in Superman's tomb, where he is starting, if you'd believe it, to get revived. That space Rubik's Cube I talked about is actually a Kryptonian AI, and it revived him basically using a Bacta tank from Star Wars. So now Clark is alive, he has a shiny new electrical suit, but he has lost his powers. He leaves the tomb and starts trying to do Superman things, but this is the first time he's ever felt weak. The AI, which is named Kay, wants Superman to leave the planet because Brainiac will kill him, but Kal-El convinces Kay to give him one more chance. Clark then sees an apartment that is on fire and pulls a Spider-Man 2, running in to save a kid from a burning building even though he has no powers. And it's like an exact replica of that scene from Spider-Man 2. I wouldn't be surprised if this script was read by the writer of that film and they just kind of took it. Okay, now cut to, and I swear to God, Lois getting a call from the doctor telling her, guess what? You're pregnant. And right after she hangs up, Brainiac shows up to her office as Lex and tries to seduce her. For some reason, he is like really horny, and when she tells him to buzz off, he kidnaps her. Okay, back to Superman. After that courageous act, Kay admits that Superman's powers were never really gone, he just had to learn to embrace them. Which, if Superman, the example of goodness and a shining beacon, doesn't know how to embrace them, I don't know who does. Anyways, now he's back in his original blue and red suit, and he goes to take down Brainiac. When he gets there, it turns out Brainiac has every nuke on the planet set to go off in 5 minutes. He also kidnapped Lois and her niece, who is preparing to bring on the ship. Oh, and also he's wearing a white tuxedo for some reason. Whatever. Superman comes flying into the building and grabs Brainiac, who, don't forget, is in Lex's body, and Brainiac says, "Back off, bro." He really says that. Right hand to God, it's in the script, back off, bro. Superman then takes Lex's head and pulls it clean off. Very on character for Superman. He's always ripping people's heads off. And as he rips it off, he says, "In the name of my mother and father, I send you to hell." I can't imagine why this movie never got made. I see no reason. This is a perfect movie. But don't worry, this ain't Man of Steel. It was a robot decoy. The real Brainiac attacks Superman and has super strength somehow. Again, he's still in Lex Luthor's body, so he shouldn't have super strength, but whatever at this point, right? They fight for a bit, Brainiac leaves Lex's body and exposes his true form. It's just about over when Brainiac, in an insanely graphic scene, starts to possess Superman. As his bones and joints start to twist and convulse, Lois screams to Superman that he's gonna be a father, and this scares Superman so much that he takes off into the sky and finds another planet. No. He hears that and he destroys Brainiac before he can be taken over. Superman takes Lois and the kid, drops the kid off at the street, and flies Lois to the top of another building. He asks her right away if it should be a big or a small wedding, and she replies with, "Let's try living together first." And that's actually a great line in my opinion, than exactly what both of them would say. The film then ends with Superman flying off, with people on the ground saying, "It's a bird, it's a plane, no, it's Superman." As the credits roll, it plays a flashback of Lois and Clark dancing at the Daily Bugle the first time they met. So obviously that's not winning Best Screenplay, but for a 90s Superman movie, I could see it passing through and getting released. So what happened? Why did Superman Lives die? In the end, the budget spiraled out of control, the script kept changing, and Warner Brothers lost faith in Burton's ability to deliver a mainstream hit. The failure of Batman and Robin didn't help either, so they pulled the plug, leaving Tim Burton heartbroken. He really wanted to show the world his version of Superman, but we would never see it. Or would we? Years after the film was canceled, Kevin Smith told a 20-minute story about his experience working on the film. It's actually hysterical. He's an amazing storyteller, and you should watch the video. But maybe wait until you finish this video first. In his story, he explains how much of a nightmare it was working with Jon Peters and how he was obsessed with trying to get that spider into the film. This clip went viral in the comic community, and in 2023, 30 years later, we got a little movie called The Flash. And for the 8 people who already watched The Flash, sorry to bring up something you already know, but for the rest of us, there was actually a cameo of Nicolas Cage as Superman. And wouldn't you believe it? He was fighting that damn spider. But the story doesn't even end there. Apparently, Cage was just as shocked as we were seeing himself on screen like that. He actually did go to set and wore the suit. He was told to just stare into the camera with a sad look. The scene was supposed to be him just watching his universe die. It wasn't until he sat down in theaters to see a younger CGI version of himself fighting a giant spider. He was confused, but didn't actually seem that pressed about it, or he hit it well. Burton, on the other hand, was pissed. In an interview, he talked about how upset it made him that his studio could take away his baby and then manipulate the idea without his permission. Whether you agree or disagree with that is up to you. But with that, Superman Lives is finally put to rest. I am honestly glad this movie never got made, but it does make me wonder how it would have affected Superman movies going forward. Would this have become the first cinematic universe? Would Snyder still have attempted the death of Superman if it had already been done? We will never know, but it's an interesting butterfly effect to think about. I'm curious what you think though. The internet seems to be pretty polarized on whether or not this would have been worth seeing. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and when you're going down there, don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it. It is interesting though to see some of these things that got reworked into other movies. Kevin Spacey did end up playing Lex Luthor in Superman Returns. The Death of Superman was adapted to live action, and the upcoming Superman movie will finally have us see Brainiac. This happens often and kind of reminds me of how Neil Blomkamp basically made District 9 with the leftover scraps from the canceled Halo movie. If you'd like to hear that story, make sure to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.